Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the British Columbia Museums Association webinar. My name is Anissa Paulson, and I will be your host for today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the BCMA offices are located on the traditional lands of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and learn here in mutual respect and appreciation. We also recognize the traditional lands of the many nations across British Columbia, where the work of the projects described in this webinar has been carried out. Today's webinar topic is filming in your community, creating opportunities for your institution. And it's presented by a wonderful group here. We've got the team at Creative BC, Julie Stangeland and Catherine Pavoni, with special guest Cy Frame from Location Fixers. Our webinar sponsor today is Lucidia, and Lucidia is a software solutions company based in Richmond, BC. They develop collections management software systems that are suitable for libraries, archives, and museums, both large and small. And Lucidia's motto is redefine how knowledge is shared, which we feel is quite fitting for this, for a webinar sponsor. And we thank Lucidia for supporting BCMA as we seek to share knowledge through our webinar series. As I mentioned, I'm Anissa Paulson, your host for today. I'm also BCMA's program officer. And if you're having technical difficulties, please call or email our office. Vanessa, our operations manager, will be able to assist. You can also send me a text. My cell phone number is there on the slide. Okay, so if you're reading this, you're doing great. Again, if not, please call the office. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions by using the chat feature. It's just at the bottom or at the top of your screen. You may have to move your mouse to the bottom or the top, and then the menu bar will appear. And then click on the chat button, type in your questions, and I will be happy to read them to our panelists throughout the webinar. Julie and Catherine have a lot of great information today, so we expect this webinar to take a full hour. And please be aware that we will feel free to ask questions at any point during the presentation. It's not necessary to wait to the end. We have a few other special guests today, in addition to the team at Creative BC. Cy Frame is the Senior Film Liaison and Location Portfolio Manager for Location Fixer Productions in Vancouver. And Cy works alongside the film industry and location owners to provide a sustainable film service that works for all parties. With a proven track record in commercial and corporate locations, Cy oversees all aspects of filming from inquiry through to the final sign-off. We're pleased to have Cy join us here today. And Cy and his team work very closely with the Vancouver Art Gallery in Vancouver, which is a popular film location. So Cy will have a chance to share his experience and expertise with us as well. So thank you, Cy, for joining us today. We also have Lindsay Foreman on hand. She's the manager and curator at the Agassiz Harrison Museum and Visitor Information Center. And Lindsay recently went through a 2-week filming at her site. So she will be able to answer questions and answer questions in the Q&A period and provide more information about her experience, lessons learned, and advice to share at that point. I'd also like to just mention and have a shout out to Samantha Brett, who's the manager of gallery events at the Vancouver Art Gallery. She was instrumental in helping us plan and organize today's webinar. And unfortunately, Samantha is not able to participate today. But she's a great resource and inspiration for our sector, and has built up a really strong gallery rental program for her institution. Okay, so this month's presenters who are taking the lead this morning or this afternoon are Julie Stangeland and Catherine Pavoni. Julie and Catherine are the motion picture industry community affairs specialists at Creative BC. And in this role, both Julie and Catherine are responsible for support and engagement with a variety of stakeholders, including all levels of government, industry, and community groups. As a first point of contact, they respond to general inquiries, address issues related to policy and process, and support physical production to help keep filming viable and sustainable in BC. Julie has over 5 years of experience in the locations department for a wide range of productions in BC. She's a graduate of the UBC Film Production Program, and she also co-wrote and produced her own short film as part of the annual Crazy 8 short film competition. And Catherine's background includes over 10 years experience in film and television production in various positions, and most recently with multiple years spent in the locations department doing episodic television. So without further ado, we will turn it over to Julie and Catherine.
Thanks, Anissa. I'm gonna switch over here. Okay, so if anybody can't hear me very well, just pipe up and I'll get closer to the microphone. So Catherine and I are going to share this, and I'll run through sort of the general Creative BC Film Commission stuff and pass it over to Catherine to talk about specific locations, process, and pieces. Thanks everybody for joining. It's hard to know how many people are online, but it's kind of exciting to do this for you guys. And as Anissa said earlier, I'd also like to acknowledge that we are privileged to work and play on the land of the Coastal Salish Nations, specifically the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh. So Motion Picture Industry and the BC Museum Association. I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about Creative BC and what it is. Creative BC was created about 6 or 7 years ago when the Provincial Film Commission and BC Film and Media were basically put together under the umbrella of Creative BC to support the creative industries across the province. So we have a few different sectors that we cover. There's film and television, which is where the Provincial Film Commission and Catherine and I work. We also cover interactive and digital media, music and sound recording, and book and magazine publishing. The Film Commission specifically has a few different services. Production services are often the first point of contact for foreign and domestic producers when they are deciding where they're going to film their project. Our colleagues are Julie Bernard, Matthew Perry, and Sean Cummings. And between them, the three of those liaise with producers and help them find the resources that they need to A, make a decision whether or not to film in the province, and then B, once they do, often they will help out with initial outreach to crew and looking for space, office and studio space and things along those lines. So specifically, they will get scripts sent to them by producers. They will go through them and create a breakdown for locations, and then from our digital library, they will create location packages that they can send back to the producers that are essentially almost like a brochure saying, here's how you can make your project creatively with the tone and atmosphere that you're looking for. Often producers are also looking at other jurisdictions at this point and things like tax incentives, the dollar, crew availability, stage space availability, all of those things, as well as the creative, tend to play into their decision-making process. The location library is managed by our fantastic library manager, Mike Jamont. This is a digital library of locations throughout the province, although the majority of the images and the ones that we access the most are in the Lower Mainland. This is where Matthew, Sean, and Julie pull all of their images from for the location packages, and then Mike manages everything. So the library, in addition to being a tool for us here at the Provincial Film Commission, is also a tool that locations professionals can access when they are actually on the ground specifically looking for unique locations for filming. All of those people are members of the DGC, which is the Directors Guild of Canada, the BC District Council. So their locations professionals have gone through the industry, they've gotten the training, they understand the process of working in locations, and because of the level of professionalism and because of the privacy with the library, they're the only people that we allow into the library to actually use independently on their own. There's a few other things, the resources that we provide for the community. One of them is in production list, where people can actually go onto our website online and see what projects are filming in the province. And then we also have an initiative called Real Green, which works towards sustainable best practices for the production for environmental, but basically to ensure that we have a low environmental footprint as an industry. And then industry and community affairs is where Catherine and I do most of our work. Oops. I forgot about this slide. So just to give people an idea of the size of the industry, in 2017-2018, the economic impact was approximately $3.4 billion spent in that year, and that's the direct spend of the production, whether it's labor or gas or groceries or hotel rooms. That's kind of the direct spend that was determined in that fiscal year. When we say there's about 60,000 jobs, there's actually approximately 42,000 jobs in direct physical production, and then there's another 20,000 or so in visual effects, post, sound, editing, things like that. And it looks like the sector is just going to continue growing, you know, another 3 or 4%, I think, is the estimation over the next few years. So why do people come up to BC to film? Over the course of, you know, 3 decades of crews coming up here and filming, we have started to develop a really strong, we have developed a really strong base of highly skilled technicians and craftsmen who have had the opportunity to work on really big shows and do some amazing things. And that is why producers come back here over and over again. They know that they can rely on the crew to actually do what the script requires. The diverse locations is a big one. BC has a really wonderful variety of landscapes, urban, rural, desert, forested, beaches. That means that a project can actually achieve everything that it needs to potentially do within the province. We are well known for our collaboration that we have with all of the stakeholders, whether they're labor unions, municipal film offices, industry associations, and government. Everybody works together in a collaborative manner. Education about how the industry works and what is required to support it. That's us, and I'll get onto community affairs shortly. One of the biggest things that we really help people understand is that the film industry can seem from the outside to be a little bit non-committal sometimes and needing to make a lot of changes as they lead up to filming in a location. And it's that creative process that sometimes drives sudden changes. And it's one of the things that we work really hard with locations and stakeholders and municipal film offices to get them to understand that's kind of an industry process that needs to be worked with. I'm just going to flip on to the next slide here. So collaborative approach, this is kind of where the community affairs comes in. We basically do a lot of relationship maintenance and communication between industry and the communities, municipal film offices, labor associations, all of those things. So you can sort of see that we have 33 municipal film offices in the Lower Mainland, which is primarily the region that Creative BC is responsible for in addition to the rest of the province. We work with the 8 regional film commissions. So the province is split up. I'll just list them, and then these are resources that you can find on our website as well. But the regional film commissions are Vancouver Island North, which is north of Courtenay up to the north end of the island, Vancouver Island South, which is south of Courtenay, including Victoria. There's also the Okanagan Film Commission. Thompson-Nicola Regional District has their own film commission. Northern BC is part of the Tourism Association, as is the Cariboo-Chilcotin Coast. It's their tourism association that manages film requests. And then we have Columbia-Shuswap over in the eastern side of the province, Kootenay, Columbia. I think that's it. We have a page on our website that lists all the regional film offices and their contact information. So for those of you who are outside the Lower Mainland, you have a film commission of your own that you can reach out to who are very, very active in production in their area. The industry associations that we work with, run from the Canadian Media Producers Association, the Motion Picture Production Industry Association, through to the labor organizations, which would be the DGCB chapter, IATSE 891. There's about 7 of them, so I won't bore you with all the names, but if you're curious, we can get you more information. And then we also do a lot of work with provincial ministries and agencies. So organizations like BC Hydro and TransLink, through to the Ministry of Environment, who manage BC Parks, and the Forest Lands and Natural Resources Operations, who manage filming on Crown land. And I'm going to pass it over to Catherine here so she can talk about opportunities for members of BCMA.
Hi there. So obviously, one of the main things we wanted to talk about today is how the film industry can provide opportunities for BCMA members. Some of them may be already quite obvious to you, and others maybe not so much. the obvious one would be revenue for location and to provide support spaces. So there's obviously two options for film companies. One would be to use a museum or a hall for an actual filming location, but in other cases they're looking for space to support the actual production. So that would be a green room for cast members. It could be a space to have lunch in. It could be a side room just to store some equipment. The film industry is always looking for space, and if you're able to provide, easy access to something like that, that'd be a great revenue source. The potential film tourism is something that's been up and coming. I'm not sure if anyone's ever heard of a little show called Once Upon a Time, but that was the first show that really paved the way for film tourism, which came from being based in Steveston for quite some time. They realized that over the years, their tourism increased about 30%, and that most of it was based on people who were interested to see where they had been filming. Sorry. I can't actually click it. Rental of historic artifacts for props and set dressing. This one I realize might be a little bit more sensitive. There are shows that are obviously set in specific time periods, and some of the props are hard to find. They will often replicate things, but sometimes it's best to find something that's already been created, and that could be an opportunity as well. Production spending in your local community. Obviously, you'd like to share the wealth. Bringing in productions to film at your location could also provide business for adjacent neighbors and properties, businesses that are close by to you. And finally, the introduction of your space to the crew, the cast, and audiences who see it on the big screen. It can be great exposure to bring awareness to some of the amazing things that you have. With regards to productions choosing a location, they appreciate certain things. Can you pull them all up? Yeah. Timely decisions is the biggest one. We understand that not everyone works at the same pace that filming does, but from the moment a location scout knocks on your door to the time they're ready to come in and film, it can be very quick. Obviously, the more you do it, the more understanding you have of the process and the faster you can be in your responses. But if someone approaches you with an inquiry and you don't think it's ever going to work out, the best thing to do is be very transparent and tell them quite honestly how long it might take to make a decision like that. Obviously, that also streamlined and transparent processes refers to that timely decision. So being very upfront with productions about what they can and cannot do. That includes how much they can control of the area they're working in. So if you have an exhibit, for example, that you really don't want to be in the shot or be used by the production, letting them know right off the bat would be the best way to go. They appreciate privacy and anonymity. Obviously, when they have big cast on set or they have a very tight storyline that they don't want to reveal until the very end of the season, they do expect locations and the people that are working around them to keep that privacy. Fair and reasonable fees, we'll get to that later. Obviously, some locations that are more well known or used more often, perhaps in the lower mainland versus out, will be more expensive, but it's up to you to maintain, a competitive and fair rate for industry so that they understand where you stand. And then supportive and understanding staff and community. Obviously, if it's your first time, maybe you not necessarily understanding everything that goes on, but the more you get your experience, being supportive of them coming back is really important to those productions that want to give you the repeat business, for sure. Choosing a location, this is probably the most frustrating thing when it comes to people who are just learning how to get into the film business in terms of using locations. Everything is based on a script. So the creative decision is what drives the decision first and foremost. So you could have a beautiful space and they come and take a look at it and then you never hear from them again. That doesn't mean that it's not because of your space, but it could be that they've decided that they want to blow it up or they want to burn it down, and that's not necessarily going to work on location every time. the important thing to remember too is they scout multiple options, and then they make their decision based on how many things below availability, agility, accessibility, and affordability. They all contribute to how they make that choice. Once you've been shortlisted, so usually they'll narrow it down to 1 or 2 locations, that's when they bring in the director, the designer, and the DOP. These are all the creative heads who really weigh in on the final decision. And even though it might look positive, these people can decide to go the other way depending on the storyline, etc. After they've chosen your location, the film process begins. This might look a little daunting, this slide, so I just wanted to let you know, obviously you can read through this later, and all of this information is on our website in our Film 101 tab that will be in your takeaway. But it's just to generally give you the understanding that the process has multiple steps to it. It starts with the scout knocking on your door. Sometimes there can be 2, 3 visits to your location. Then you have to negotiate a fee. You have to determine your schedule. So I can speak further to that process in terms of what happens with agreements, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Then there'll usually be some kind of a prep period where they'll come in, make things safe, take things away, dress things in. The shoot, obviously, is the biggest portion. That's when you can have anywhere from 20 to 200 people on site, everyone knowing what their job is, but it can seem a little overwhelming in the moment. So it's important to ask as many questions as you can during prep to prepare yourself for that. And then during the wrap, which is usually quite a bit quicker than the prep, that's where everything gets pulled out, and basically they shine your location up and it looks good as new, like they've never been there before. So those would be the big picture process items, but it's important if you read through the information, if you are thinking about it, so you can make yourself a checklist of the right questions to ask. The specific questions to ask yourself when you're determining a rental fee, are you or your staff members required to open or close? Sometimes a production requires someone to be on site with them 24/7. If you feel comfortable handing over the keys, that happens often as well. And in that case, a location manager would be the one who's running the show. Obviously, if you have to close, or you have to close for a large period of time, will that affect your regular customers or your clients, or cause any kind of loss of return for those people? What have you charged in the past for a similar event? Obviously, if you haven't had filming before, but perhaps you've held a wedding, or you've held a graduation or a photo shoot, trying to base it off something that's similar is a useful tool. And then obviously you can consult with colleagues, or you can call us, or you can call Cy. Any of those resources, just try to help determine what the appropriate rental fee might be for your space. We just wanted to quickly touch on the code of conduct. That's something that's posted on our website as well. Part of what we do here at Creative BC is we try to keep filming sustainable in the Lower Mainland. And one of those ways is encouraging everyone on the film set to be ambassadors for the film industry. That means that it doesn't matter if you're the PA or the director, that everyone treats the public and the space very respectfully. And we expect all crew members to abide by our code of conduct, which one important aspect of it is that we leave the location exactly as we've found it. I'm going to pass this one back to Julie on how to promote your property.
So I just realized that, oh wait, am I on? Can you guys hear me, or am I muted? Okay, thank you. One thing that we didn't put on the takeaway, which we can get that information to you, is contact information for Mike Jamont, the library manager. So he's a good contact to have if you decide that you want to put your property in the locations library. Mike would be the guy to kind of help you through that. And there is information on the website. But essentially, location files are a bit different than beauty photo files that you might think are what is needed to promote your property. Often the scouts want to know what's across the street, what what are they looking at if they turn their head to the left? What are they looking at if they turn their head to the right? And then actually kind of the room from all four corners, or rooms from all four corners. So there's some instructions on the website if you guys are interested in that, can kind of help you through that. So you can actually upload all of this yourself to our website, and then Mike and his assistant Laura would be the people who would go through those photo files and then get them into the digital library. They will always contact you and reach out, to make sure that they have correct information, and if they have any questions or concerns about the photos or the property. And this slide is actually one that we often use for just general community people as well, merchants, residents, if they want to put their house or their business in the library. We have a little benefits of filming on location, which is the stories and the income, and then actually supporting the industry. So we just did a little screen grab for you guys of our website. It can be a little bit confusing. We'd like to actually work on our website, but it's a bit of a resource thing at the moment. But one of the biggest tabs that would be of interest to you is the community one just here. When you click on the community tab, there's a number of different resources that you can actually have a read through, from what the initial filming process looks like, questions to ask, concerns, and then an understanding of what that process is like, actually also from a municipal point of view. Most municipalities have one person in particular who processes all of the film permits. That's always good information to know as well, because that's kind of an unseen collegial relationship that can happen between locations and the municipal film office. It's good to always kind of know who that person is. And then these are some links that we have also put on the takeaway for everybody that, as Catherine mentioned, includes the code of conduct, the locations 101, the library information, which is where you can reach Mike, and then community resources. And I think now we're handing it over to Sai.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sai Frame. I'm a film liaison location portfolio manager with Location Fixer Productions. I specialize in commercial, corporate, and industrial locations in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. Our company was conceived in 2007, and our services range from on-site supervision, otherwise known as a film liaison, through to the full management of film activity from start to finish. We've been working with the Vancouver Art Gallery since the summer of 2013. When we first started with the Vancouver Art Gallery, we were hosting between 6 and 10 film productions a year. In 2018, we hosted a record number of 29 productions. And this year alone, we've already hit 14 by the beginning of June. So to make this happen, we've gradually developed the film program at the gallery to a point where staff, events, programs, and activities coexist in a positive, constructive manner. This didn't happen overnight, but more or less progressively over the years. Here are some of the major points in running a successful film program such as we have at the Vancouver Art Gallery. By the way, everyone, some of these points Catherine has already gone over, but this is more specific to the Vancouver Art Gallery. Determine what areas and spaces of the gallery or museum are aesthetically pleasing to the film industry. Apart from the obvious areas, there might even be areas that you wouldn't guess to be viable. For example, office space, hallways, exterior back alley, etc. Having a film scout or liaison visit the site can help in this process. 2, determine the availability and accessibility of each space. Take into account that film can shoot on weekends or even overnight, but preferably they're like weekdays. In most cases, for an area to be viable for film, roll-in access is important. To avoid stairs and try to avoid stairs where possible. Preparing a document that outlines, number 3, preparing a document that outlines the availability and pricing. Again, it's a good idea to ask around with film industry experts regarding pricing and costing structures. 4, marketing your location to the film industry. You can use companies like Location Fixer, self-promotion, film resources such as Creative BC, or probably best to just do all of them. Number 5, and this is important, open the doors to film scouts. So from my experience, approximately 1 in every 10 scouts actually leads to on-site film activity. It is important that you show the site to as many scouts as possible. Film scouts may call you at the drop of a hat. Try to accommodate short turnarounds as much as possible. That really is the key to starting off a good relationship. If they could see that you're actively adaptable to quickly turning around and showing somebody a site, that'll go straight to the top straight away. Number 6, preparing an organization. Once a film production starts to show interest after a scout, make sure to collect as much information as possible. Dates, times, scope of activity, number of crews, and any special requirements. Always ask when the film production would like to visit for a technical survey. A technical survey, also known as tech survey, is where all the heads of each department will survey each space they intend on using and what the scope of their activity involves. At the Vancouver Art Gallery, we collect as much information as possible during this tech survey, and then this information is reviewed internally for approval. At which point, if we have any issues or concerns, we can relay it back to the production. It's a very crucial part of the stages and the steps. Number 7, contracts and agreements. Some film productions have their own location agreement, which in most cases is fine, but be sure to have your legal department read over the document before signing. At the Vancouver Art Gallery, we have an agreement that has been prepared by our own lawyers. We find this suitable because we have regular activity. To be honest, I could speak about contracts that are suitable and suitable agreements, but I just don't have time. It could go for hours. It's definitely good to do a little, to talk to other locations, see what kind of agreements they have in place, and their experiences. Most of the galleries and museums may even have a rental agreement that will probably need to be revised to incorporate film. Number 8, collect a deposit to compensate for any loss of revenue if production cancels at the last minute. Again, there are many ways to implement this, but again, I don't really have time to go into it today. But I'm happy to talk about this afterwards if anyone wants to contact me. Number 9, staffing. This is an important one. Each location has different staffing requirements. For the sake of this discussion, I will outline what is required at the Vancouver Art Gallery. Because of all the artwork and irreplaceable items, we require the use of security to be positioned on set, around the film crew, and on any open doors. In addition to security, we have at least one film liaison on site the entire time the activity takes place. Please note, the hours can be long, so make sure you schedule accordingly. Working behind the scenes at the Vancouver Art Gallery, we have a rental coordinator whom we check in with regularly and who helps with schedule changes and contractual issues. Number 10, be adaptable where possible. It is important to remember that film production crews work long, exhausting hours, and it's common for them to run behind schedule. It really pays off to help out and adapt to these changes when possible. The production company will love you for it, and the location will be considered film friendly. And then 11, finally, wrap and resolution. Once the film crew have completed their film activity and start to strike and reset the location, it is important to communicate any deficiencies or damage as early as possible. This gives the production time to respond in due course. 99% of the time, the production will resolve any outstanding issues promptly, and in some cases, they'll go beyond the call and leave the space in better condition than when they arrived. Take reference photos before they occupy the space, and again once they wrap. This is key to resolving any disputed issues. I hope this information has been beneficial in making a decision in pursuing film at your gallery or museum, or if you're already allowing film and would like to open the horizon to more film activity. If anyone would like to reach out after the webinar and discuss film and film locations, I'd be happy to accommodate. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, Sai. Thanks very much.
Cool.
If Julie and Catherine, I don't know if you had anything to follow up with, but I'm opening it up now to the chat box. So if anybody has specific questions for any of these panelists, please do type them into the chat box. I had a question for any of you, actually. Sai mentioned arranging a visit by a film scout if you feel like your location could be a suitable or your museum could be a suitable location for a film crew. What's the process for doing that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's not that you really would call a film scout. It's more to chat with them when you do have your first film scout.
Oh.
Ask them not only what they're looking for on that particular day, but ask them what they think about the location in general, because a film scout, you know, at that particular scout, they may only be looking for one item at your site, but that film scout it has the ability to know whether your site would be viable for all the productions that they've been scouting for in the year before, for example. So they're very knowledgeable in that sense. So definitely worth talking to them and asking their opinion on your location.
Okay, we have a question from a participant. Is there an application process for applying for a team to come to our location to cover a topic, like a short documentary commission? Does that make sense?
Can you ask again? Sorry.
Is there an application process for applying for a team to come to the location to cover a specific topic? I guess it sounds like they might be interested in having somebody come to shoot a short documentary or commission or something like that.
Yeah, I think that they would probably need to maybe identify what the topic is that they're looking to get a film made about, and then I would suggest we could do a little bit of research in the background, but they would want to reach out to some documentary makers, possibly. Yeah, there's not kind of like one big organization that you can sort of say like, hey, we have all these ideas, who would like to grab one? The NFB is somebody that they might want to reach out to and research into. It really depends on what they're thinking of. If this is if it's a topic that they think a filmmaker might be interested in and they're trying to find a filmmaker to come and do some work on it, or if they're actually looking to do a bit of a production themselves, in which case they'd also be looking at financing and things like that. So that's kind of that's out of our scope in terms of just being a location for filming.
Okay. Another question just came in. How do you find out what fair rental rates and liaison fees are? Just to ensure that your organization and staff are paid for their space and time. I think you all kind of mentioned that it's good to know what to charge, but is there a sort of like range that you could recommend, or is there, you know, a lot of our BCMA members are very small institutions with no experience and may potentially like undersell their space just because they're not used to getting big bucks. Is there a range that one might expect for a film company to come?
I can speak to that. I would say that unfortunately we don't usually offer a range when determining a fee. It really depends on what the size of the production is, exactly what they're doing in the location, what kind of production it is. So say it was a documentary crew that wanted to come and shoot a tiny little shot, you know, they could ask for doing it for $100 or something like that. It's unfortunate for us because we can't recommend a specific rate unless we know more about what the production is itself and what would be entail. So if a museum was closed for 3 days versus 1 day, if a small cultural center, you know, had a production there for 3 weeks versus, you know, it really depends on the impact of that production. So we don't usually give a range. I can say, unless it's a student, that you should charge something, if that's helpful. Obviously, if it's best to qualify it based on, you know, what your staff time is worth, and then consider the fact that, you know, if they're there outside of regular hours, that they should obviously be paid more than they normally would, especially if they're being asked to do something that's outside their scope of work. So, you know, it's unfortunate that we can't really recommend an exact rate, but, you know, fairly compensated for everyone's time, for what it costs to close, for what it would be if you were having an event. And then if you have specific questions about the kind of production that is there, they could reach out to us to help determine whether what they've offered is fair. The film industry, we hope, is quite fair in what they are offering. For the most part, they wouldn't, for lack of a better word, try to lowball someone, because that information will generally get out. And I find that most location managers are quite fair in what they're offering and would be doing their own calculations at the same time, sort of what that space is worth to them and what their impact will be. But if they ever feel like they're being taken advantage of, we're absolutely a resource for that, or their local film commissioners can tell them what a similar type space has gone for in the past in their specific areas. Because again, it could be different from the lower mainland to, you know, the Kootenays. It really changes depending on where you're located.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that most location managers that are working on Hollywood type shows, whether they're TV series or feature films, they often have like kind of standard location rates for various different things. You know, a large mansion style house is probably going to get a little bit more of a rate than a smaller 2-bedroom bungalow. And the same goes for public spaces and businesses as well, which is why we sort of recommend that locations kind of understand their own terms and what's okay with them. So what would your lost revenue be? What is your cost of business over the course of that time period? If your staff are losing out on work, then maybe you want to wrap that up into your location fees, actually, so that you could still pay their staff for lost days of work. So those are the kind of calculations that we encourage businesses to already understand before they get approached or before they enter into negotiations. But by and large, most location managers on professional shows, they have a range, and I think they're often open to negotiation, but they have a fairly fair market rate range that they're going to offer from the get-go.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question came in regarding the deposit amounts. The question is asking if there's any rule of thumb to use to determine the deposit amount. And this person says they've been getting pushback lately. They've been asking for an amount close to their total location fees, less the liaison fees.
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, look, in most cases, the agreement has an insurance clause in it that will repair any major damage. So most of our locations don't collect a damage deposit because it's basically redundant. It's not necessary. And I consider it overkill. So we don't actually collect a damage deposit. We collect a holding deposit. And it's actually a very small amount of money. It's just $1,000 in our case. And that's just to ensure at that point, we will hold those dates for that film production. And if they decide to go somewhere else, they're going to lose that. And that just covers us for loss of revenue for holding those days aside and not booking it out to another film production. As far as damage deposit, your agreement and your insurance policy should cover you for any damages. Plus the film productions, like I said, in 99% of the cases, will fix that without even using insurance. In fact, in all my years, I don't know if I've ever seen a film production actually utilize their insurance policy to fix the damage. So, you know, there's two different types of holding. In fact, we have 3 different types of deposits that I've seen in the industry. One is a damage deposit, which we don't use much. The other one's a holding deposit for a small figure. And then at other facilities that we use, like hospitals where we have multiple staffing, we actually take a $3,000 deposit per day, and that covers, we actually have the wages taken out of that deposit, and then we reimburse the remaining at the end. So it really depends on the location, how much staffing's involved. There's a lot of different factors. Yeah, but that's generally our rule.
And I would say it's worthwhile having a deposit if they're going to be, fees charged after. your liaison fees, your security fees, kind of figuring out what those potentially could be, and determining a deposit based on that, just so that you know you have the money if God forbid anything happens and the production leaves without paying the security fees, then you actually have something to draw from. That doesn't happen very often, but it's worthwhile thinking about.
Okay, thank you for that. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, feel free to type in a follow-up into the chat box. I wanted to just bring Lindsay into the conversation here and ask Lindsay if she wants to share any lessons learned or advice with the audience. She recently went through a film process at her location. Lindsay, are you there?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep, great. Yeah, so we just had a production in March and it came very fast and furious, just like these wonderful panelists have been describing. Basically from the point of contact to the start of setup was about a week. So yeah, responding quickly and being on top of things is really important. So we're a support facility, so we didn't have any filming going on within our building, but it was used for 2 full weeks, pretty much a good 12, sometimes 14 hours a day, to support the staff when they're doing setup. They lunched there. They stored their tools there, and then during filming a few days, it acted as the green room for the actors. And then again for tear down, lunchrooms and such for the support staff. So we have a 2-story building, and they basically used our main gallery. And fortunately for us, we have a double set of doors right off the gallery, which was great for access for them. But they also used our washroom facilities, and they were really heavily used for that 2-week period, despite there being other accessible public washrooms at the other end of the park they were filming at. But that was one definite take home, is that in the future with such a large crew, we would definitely have to ask them to bring in other washroom facilities, because there were lineups, there were, luckily for us, we had just installed 2 new toilets because our building is quite old, but yeah, that was one take home for me. But yeah, the location manager and his team were fantastic. He checked in with me daily. It was our first time to have that happen at our facility, so it was a big learning curve for me. I'm the only full-time staff member, so I also acted as the liaison for the production. So I was putting in a long days for 2 weeks, worked I think about 12 days out of 14 or something like that, because my board did not want to hand keys over to the production company. But yeah, so really long hours, but these folks, they treated me like one of their own. Invited me to have the catering, invited me to take breaks. They would cover off for me if need be. So that was a really great experience. And then at the end, they did a great job cleaning everything up, no problem at all. I had moved everything out that was valuable already, but we walked through, everything was, back to better than normal. It was nice and clean. And I guess too, we don't have an agreement in place, so we used their agreement. I wasn't sure about possible rates and fees. So what I did, I know that there had been a production at another local historic site, so I got in touch with the manager there. I also talked to somebody in Mission who was in charge of filming, and I even reached out to the Gulf of Georgia Cannery because I know they had a lot of filming there. Just to kind of get an idea about rates and possibility leverage for negotiation. I didn't end up negotiating anything extra because I was going on good faith that they were paying us fairly, which seems to have been the case. they paid a liaison fee hourly to me, as well as a rental fee weekly for the 2 weeks they were using our facility. So yeah, so I think overall it was a great experience for us, and we made some great money that we're still set aside to earmark it for something, most likely purchase of new display cases, because it was quite a good chunk of change. And I think that word is getting out about that experience among the industry. We were not registered. We haven't been registered or anything as a location, but just last week I had another location scout come through to look at the space. So I just walked her through, and it kind of gave her a rundown of what had happened in March, and told her about potential dates, because we are only open seasonally. And so that other production just kind of came in just before we opened for the season. And so I told her about that, and she's like, oh yeah, that would be great to know. That way we don't disrupt any services. So yeah.
Sorry, I was muted there. But excellent. Thanks, Lindsay. That sounds like a very positive experience for your museum. So I appreciate you sharing that. We do have a few other questions that have popped up here. One is from another small museum with limited space and many displays and artifacts. And if the production company needs to remove the museum displays, do they ensure that the artifacts are kept and stored properly? Because there happens to be no storage space at this particular museum.
I can speak to that. I had a slide in the presentation earlier, but it started to get a little convoluted. One of the points on it was that specific to props, sorry, not props, artifacts and displays, if that's one of the things that you have to negotiate from the start. So if anything needs to be removed, generally it's done either by the location or by the art department on the show, and they will relocate items if you don't have space to store it on site. It's always preferred to leave it there if possible, because there's less of a concern about moving it, but that is definitely a possibility. I have for sure had art departments remove whole rooms worth of furniture, moved them away, packed them up properly, stored them for the duration, and then brought them back, set them back exactly how they were. Obviously, there's lots of picture taking involved. Usually it would be supervised on the back end, and when they bring it at the front end, and when they bring it back. But yes, I think that that's a possibility, absolutely.
Can I add to that? I would just be very careful of environmental conditions that those artifacts were in the original position, and where they're going into storage. For art, for example, we have major considerations. We have to have permission from the artist. I think it's a little different with museum artifacts. I could be wrong, but just take that into consideration. Also, your location agreement won't cover you for moving things off site, being stored. So you want to look into that as well, and probably some sort of damage deposit or deposit in the form of the value of the artifacts when they leave the site, because it's no longer under your current insurance policy. So there are things that you would want to look into as well.
Okay, thank you both for that. Another question is about liability insurance, and I'll read them out. I think there's two that are very similar. Are there small institutions, let's see, I guess, do smaller museums find their liability insurer does not want to cover filming? It sounds like this museum's company requires prior notice and will charge a fee. So I'm not.
Yeah, I can answer that. Most productions have a large insurance policy. That's kind of an umbrella insurance, and everywhere that they end up filming, they will issue a certificate of insurance to either that location or that property owner, or under the name of the business. So in the time that the production is actually in the location, and those would be the contracted dates, then there is insurance underneath the production's account, essentially, for that time. So I don't, it's in my experience of working in locations, we have never asked a location's liability insurance to be changed for our presence there, we have always had a certificate of insurance issued to the location for the time that we're there, because the production has had an agreement, essentially a rental agreement, to be in that location, and then they have insurance to cover their time there. Does that answer the question?
I think so. We'll see if there's another follow-up that comes through. And then one other question, how common are in-kind site improvements in lieu of site fees in terms of compensation?
In lieu of fees?
Yeah, it sounds like instead of perhaps, monetary compensation for the use of a space, is there any precedent for like, I don't know, improving their site, it sounds like, or maybe doing some repair work maybe that might be necessary instead of getting paid financially? Does that make sense?
You're muted there.
I think with smaller productions especially, they often are trying to find creative ways to give back to spaces if they can't compensate them monetarily. Sometimes with most film productions, they roll around with 1 or 2 construction people, 1 or 2 paint people, sometimes a greens department that can plant gardens, fix up hedges, that sort of thing. It's not that usual for larger productions, especially with rental agreements involved. There's usually a fee involved, but for smaller, scrappy productions, they'll think of creative ways to give back in lieu for renting spaces. I've heard of that for sure.
Okay.
I could maybe add to that as well. I mean, just be careful if you are keeping something in lieu of costing. Just make sure that it's been built to code. That it's not just a film set wall that they're leaving in place. You have to think about all these things. If something's going to stay, it's going to be left behind by the production. Just make sure that it's kind of a permanent build. The other way to negotiate as well is maybe, they want to use an extra space, but they've got a greens department. You could just say, look, you can use this space if you mow the lawn out the front of the place. Those kind of agreements happen all the time, and they usually don't even enter the contract. And that we witness quite a lot.
Great, thank you very much. I just had one other quick question. At the beginning, you mentioned something about historic artifacts might sometimes be needed by film companies. Is there also a database or a directory for that? For those items?
Unfortunately, we don't have anything here at the Provincial Film Commission. I think that if you have specific props that have been A, used before by a production, or B, that you think would be of interest to a production, the best way to get them out there is to contact props houses. These are people that have, in general, large inventories of these kind of props, but they may have questions that are asked to them on occasion about finding specific things. So if they're aware that you're agreeable for rentals, getting your name on their kind of personal directory would be one way. But industry-wide, unfortunately, it's a lot of word of mouth, a lot of phone calls. I don't think at this point there's any province-wide directory for that kind of thing. But again, props houses try to keep that information on hand.
Okay, excellent. Great, well, thank you very much. I am going to take over your screen here. And we are out of time, so thank you very much. I think that was really great. There was a lot of questions. You guys did a great job answering them. Just so everybody knows, Catherine, Sai, and Julie prepared a handout that I will be sending out to all of the webinar participants. And I think it includes a sample template agreement that you can adapt to your specific situation as well, which is a really great resource. So thank you very much, all of you, for that. As well, I just want to thank again our panelists for today, and each of them will be getting a BC Museums Association mug in the mail very soon to a small gesture to thank you for your efforts to bring together this very informative webinar today. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say that if anybody wishes to reach out to us directly, they're welcome to do that. Our contact information is on the website. Okay,
thank you so much.
Same with us as well. With the handout, we have the contact information at the bottom and our website. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. You've been very generous with your time and information, so I appreciate that. I just noticed this slide says join us in June. You're already doing that, but I meant to say join us in July because our next webinar is Tuesday, July 23rd, and it's being presented by Natanya Waddell and Lorraine Bell from the Qualicum Beach Museum, who have just been through a collections reorganization storage project. So they will be on hand to share their experience there. Again, for all of you who have suggestions for future webinar topics, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us and let us know what you're interested in learning or sharing. And as well, everybody will be receiving a link to a survey in your inbox soon. And so please fill it out and let us know what you thought of today's webinar. And then again, join BCMA in general. We have lots of good perks for being a member, including free webinar participation. So thank you all very much again for being here today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Take care.